Hello and welcome back to another one of these tier list ranking videos. This is the next one in the series. We've done 1 through to 7, we've done 9 and 10, and now we are doing the 11th Doctor. And I need to preface this, 11 is my original Doctor. I jumped on board with the Time of Angels, so series 5 is a series that I adore for many nostalgia reasons. I also think that it is the best season of series of New Who. And I do think Matt Smith's era is probably the strongest era of them all. Just to say, it definitely does dip in quality. I think Series 5 is better than Series 6, and Series 6 is much better than Series 7. But I really don't dislike a lot in this era. I love Matt Smith as a Doctor. I love Amy, Rory, and Clara. Although Clara's much better with Capaldi. So I'm just going to get on with this and kick off with the 11th Hour, which I would class as the episode which single-handedly made me fall in love with Doctor Who. I watched Time of Angels, I thought this was pretty good, and I went onto BBC iPlayer and I went back and I watched this. This is phenomenal. I cannot believe that they were able to pull this out of the bag. The pressure was on after Russell T Davies left, new showrunner Stephen Moffat, new Doctor, new companion, new tone of the show, a new musical style for Murray Gold, and everything is perfect. This script is so fast-paced and it's witty, and it's just glistening and it's charming, and I love the villains. I know people have often been quick to slag off Prisoner Zero or the Atraxi, but I think they're great. Perfect for this story. It's a nice, quirky, fun feeling. The new fairy tale style of the music is just gorgeous. Matt Smith is great from the off as you see him sort of move very Tennant-like at the start and slowly become the Doctor who we would recognise as the 11th Doctor. Series 5 Matt Smith is also the best Matt Smith. He is one of the few actors who I don't think grew into the role. I actually think he got less compelling over time, if possible. Maybe only at the very end of Series 7. He's slightly derailed as a character, but he's at his best here because he's at his sort of most dark, I think, and slightly somber at times, but he's still fun and wacky. And this whole entire episode is just, for me, the most perfect post-generation story possible. It gives him the big I'm the Doctor moment, and the moment when he steps through Tennant's image, shedding the last of the raggedy clothes with his bow tie straightened, and he says, "Hello, I'm the Doctor, basically run." It's such a phenomenal moment. We get some great introduction to Amy, a great introduction to Rory, and to the dynamics or the power dynamics of Series 5 as a whole. It sets up the Crack in the Wall arc. The amount of things that this does in 60 minutes, and not just does it well, but could not physically do it any better. It's an incredibly impressive piece of Doctor Who. And it's one that I never get tired of rewatching. The Beast Below is a much slagged off episode, and maybe it would have done better as a two-parter, but I would put it in good, I think. I kind of really like The Beast Below. And yeah, I just think it's a really good script. It's a great way to take your companion. I think after Donna with Fires of Pompeii, they realized that it's a good decision to take a companion to something that challenges them and allows them to challenge the Doctor and put them at odds with the Doctor in their first story. It's a great format to do something like this very early on with a companion and put them, the Doctor and the companion, at loggerheads. It looks great. It's a great idea. Lovely themes about animal exploitation and about, I suppose, a democracy that makes you forget and makes you elect to forget. There's a lot of big Moffat-y ideas in this one, which is probably why people don't like it as much, but I find it a really, really great episode. And I just love Matt Smith being pushed so much further than you would need a Doctor to be 2 episodes in, and the dynamic between the Doctor and the companion being pushed so far early on. And the comparison, of course, to the lonely alien who's the last of the kind who only interferes when they hear children cry. It's very Moffat's fairy tale Who, but that's probably why I like it so much. Victory of the Daleks is one that I've soured on considerably. I used to love it because it was my first Dalek story. Now I'm not as big a fan, but I will still defend it as okay. Some people seem to think this is like the worst Dalek story ever, simply because the Daleks got a paint job and I didn't like it. The multicolored Daleks look stupid, but I kind of, that's sort of totally superfluous to me. You know, with any villain or whatever, how they look, that is important, but it's how they actually act, which is more important. And I find the Daleks in this story pretty good. They get to Power of the Daleks style, use cunning to manipulate Winston Churchill and to manipulate, you know, all these Second World War figures. The actual story is way too rushed. That's the reason it's in okay. And I do think this is the weakest episode of series 5, but I still have fun with it. I still have fun because I love Eleven's rage when it's just totally loses it with the Dalek and starts battering it. I enjoy Amy in this episode, Churchill and Bracewell. It's just a fun cast with a fun premise in a story that should have been a lot better than it actually was, but I still enjoy it. Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. I'm not going to do this with all the two-parters, but I'm just going to deal with these as one complete entity because I feel like both parts are very even. This is a really good two-parter. I think Rusty Davies has called this, has said that this is one of the best scripts of Doctor Who he's ever seen. I saw an interview with him properly praising this episode and saying when he was watching it for the first time, he thought it was like a Doctor Who movie. He thought it was incredible. It is brilliant. It's not quite in that absolute classic tier, but it is a great two-parter. I think it's criminally underrated. I think it does what you should do when you're bringing back a great one-off villain, which is it adds to their mythology. A lot of people have pointed to this episode as some sort of, they shouldn't have brought the Weeping Angels back. They've said that they shouldn't, you know, have done all these things to the Weeping Angels, but I think that they are brilliant additions to the Weeping Angels lore. You know, the fact that you can't look them in the eyes, the image of an angel becomes itself the angel, all these other little ideas turn the very few weaknesses of the angels against the Doctor and against the audience. And the fact that they're lured in on this promise of a story that would be about one angel hiding among statues and it transpires that all of the statues are angels is a brilliant way to just up the tension at the end of what is actually a fairly uneventful first part, but still very good despite the fact that not a lot happens. The cliffhanger is sublime and the second part just moves at this fast base under siege base as they are just running away from the angels. And I don't think it's a problem that the story resolves itself. Some people always have a real bee in their bonnet about stories that would have resolved themselves anyway without the Doctor. Caves of Androzani would have resolved itself. You could argue. It's not about that. It's about the Doctor getting Amy out safe because in going in, they've made a huge mistake. And it's about the very natural and very well-placed arc service, which comes in again at the end of the whole series. I think this is a great two-parter with a lot of stuff to love about it. Vampires of Venice is good. It's the sort of story that people would normally slag off. It's a very filler episode in the middle of a series between two very important arc and character heavy episodes in Flesh and Stone, Time of Angels and Amy's Choice on either side. And it's just a complete blast of fun. Seriously, this is just the sort of story that Doctor Who has forgot how to have. Nowadays, when we do filler episodes, we just do a lot of standing about talking about things. This is just bonkers. We're blowing things up, we're running away, we're fighting vampires. The vampires are actually fish people. There's a lot of great ideas. Also, the late Helen McCroy, what a performance. I think she really cuts to the heart of the Doctor, and the performance of Matt Smith in that final scene when she jumps in the water and he has the weight of another dead race is such a dark ending to what is essentially a very fun historical runaround where the Doctor climbs a massive bell tower. Rory fights a vampire with a cross and a broom. It's just a great dose of fun, and it's the sort of story that we need more of, in my opinion. We don't need more big, dark, somber classics. We need more just bursts of energy and fun in the middle of series to really liven things up. And that's exactly what Vampires of Venice does. Amy's Choice is one of the most underrated stories of all time. And put it in great this does wonders for every single character that's on screen. The Doctor, Amy, and Rory are our main TARDIS team, and it does something which another thing that should be done early on in any era is to have a really strong character-focused episode. You know, the Chibnall era had something quite similar with Can You Hear Me? But it kind of just focused on Yaz and Graham, totally putting Ryan and 13 to the side. And it was too late. It was too late to do these things because these characters were nearly done. And this is early on, particularly for the character of Rory, who it's very important for. I think this is the most important episode for Amy and Rory's character arcs together. I think it really cuts to the heart of the Doctor because the Dream Lord is a manifestation of the dark in the Doctor. All of the things that he's saying is things that the Doctor thinks about himself. And then just the plot, both of these two worlds that they're going in at once. It's a genius, high concept idea with the dreams and the angry pensioners. And it's just weird and bonkers. And I didn't enjoy it as much as a child. I think this was the one Series 5 episode that when I originally watched it, didn't overly love. But every single time I watch it subsequently, I think it just gets better and better. Maybe it's because just as I'm getting older and I'm appreciating the stuff they're doing with the characters more. But even on just a plot level, this is a lot of fun, but it's also incredibly important for all of our characters. I really enjoy this one. The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood I will again deal with together. Yeah, I think I'll put Cold Blood slightly ahead of the Hungry Earth. I think it is a slightly better story, in all honesty. Just sheerly on the pacing of the thing, the Hungry Earth Cold Blood gets a rough time from people who say that it's too slow, it's too dull, or that it's just a rip-off of the Silurians from 1970. I don't care about any of those things. I know that the plot is very similar to the Silurians, and I know that the Silurians' new design is quite far away from the original, and whilst I much prefer the original, that doesn't detract from what is a very enjoyable story with very well-crafted, well-rounded characters, interesting character dynamics, a very, very tight script from Chris Chibnall, interesting exploration of ideas, a cliffhanger which, again, changes the direction of the entire story. And that's what I love about Stephen Moffat era cliffhangers. The Russell Davies era sort of went for the big immediate danger, which would then be resolved within a couple of minutes. Whereas what Stephen Moffat liked to do was up the tension, and at halfway through have a twist which just changes the entire dynamics of the episode. And going from fighting a handful of Silurians to an entire civilization was a great move for that. And it doesn't have a happy ending. It really doesn't. And Rory's death is really, really well done. And even in the knowledge that it's going to be undone in a couple of episodes, it still hits me. I still think it's very perfectly acted, perfectly played. And then the final twist of the Doctor discovering that the shrapnel from the cracks in time is a piece of the TARDIS. Sublime. Brilliant stuff. Blimey. Vincent and the Doctor. Absolute classic. So good. Just next level television. I don't care about the actual plot. Yes, there's something about an invisible chicken, and that stuff's all fine. It's perfectly fine. The last 10 minutes of this are 10 of the best minutes of television I've ever seen. Such good messaging. And we've built up, I've got to say, even though the bit before, because some people have said this episode's overrated because of that last 10 minutes and the rest of the plot is nothing special, and maybe it's not. But it's still funny and charming and likable because the characters, are likable, and it's still doing this very deep dive into Vincent's depression and all of these interesting ideas that are already at play. But those last 10 minutes are just so good. Bill Nye's speech, Vincent's face, Vincent seeing the TARDIS for the first time and taking to the future, the music that's playing in the background of that scene, and then them taking them back, and Amy thinking that it would have made a difference. But it didn't, and it would have been a total cop-out. And obviously they could never have done it, but it made a difference because that's just historically inaccurate. But it would have been a cop-out if his entire life had been changed by their interactions. And the Doctor did it in the knowledge that it wouldn't, because he would never have messed with history. He already knew that whatever they were going to do was not going to change that. And it's a really kind of horrible but lovely message that, you know, whatever you do for that person who's suffering with mental illness, even if they lose that fight, it doesn't make those things without value, or the good things you did, you know, without any purpose at all. You know, she says, Amy says, we didn't make a difference at all. And he says, you know, every life is a pile of good things and bad things. We definitely added to his pile of good things. It's just such a beautiful message. And I really love this episode. I love the acting. I love the music. Yeah, I love the characters. I think Richard Curran is it Richard? Tony Curran? Tony Curran? Yeah, is brilliant as Vincent, and I love all the imagery taken straight from the Vincent van Gogh paintings, such as the stars and the cafe. And Richard Curtis, who wrote for Blackadder, who knew he had this script in him? Who knew he had this beautiful, poignant Doctor Who script in him? And I think it's a really great story. The Lodger is the blast of fun that Series 5 needed again. And just like Vampires of Venice, it comes at the time when you sort of need it. This is between Rory's death and then Vincent, which is a very heavy-hitting episode, and then the finale on the other side. And it's just having fun. It's got that kind of Black Orchid thing where it just lets our cast have a laugh for the entire runtime and, you know, play some sport and interact like normal people. And it takes a very comedic tone. And a lot of people really kind of dislike that, possibly because they just dislike James Corden. That seems to be a recurring thing with people who really hate on this episode. And yes, the plot itself is nothing special, but this is the difference between Series 5 and other times in the show. If I'm enjoying the characters, I'm enjoying the tone, if I'm enjoying everything this much, then you can get away with doing a plot that's a little bit half-arsed. You can get away with it because I'm enjoying myself too much to really care about that. Obviously, the plot is always still important, but it's just fine. I'm really charmed by the actual episode itself. And people obviously want to hate this now because it's a Gareth Roberts script, but that is no reason to dislike a piece of television just because you don't like the views of the writer. I think it's a very good episode, and I've got nothing more to say on that subject. Just move on to the Pandorica Opens, which is sublime. I'm pretty sure when we did our best possible series video, me with my two siblings, we both did, I think we all put the Pandorica Opens for episode 12. It's that good. This is the best first part to a finale. No, it's not. No, it's heaven sent. Okay, this is the second best first part of the finale. This is sublime with television. Absolute brilliant world building. All the character arcs and story arcs, all those pieces of the puzzle coming together, and we're watching them all come together on the screen. The big Stonehenge speech, return of Rory, River, Amy, Centurions, Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, Sycorax, Draconians. Everyone is coming for the Pandorica, and the Pandorica itself is such a C.S. Lewis style fairy tale idea that perfectly matches the tone of this series. And the cliffhanger is the greatest cliffhanger in Doctor Who. I love Inferno Part 6. I love The Caves of Androzani Part 3. There's a couple of other New Who cliffhangers that I love, but nothing betters this. Amy gets shot and she dies in Rory's arms. River is in the TARDIS as it explodes. The Doctor is trapped inside the Pandorica as it closes forever, and he's screaming the entire view, and then you zoom out and the entire universe ceases to exist. We watch as the stars go out, and then the audio cuts and there's silence for a couple of seconds, and then it's to be continued. It's so good. It's a phenomenal cliffhanger, and it's perfectly done. And the Big Bang, I'm debating between great and absolute classic, but I'll just put an absolute classic just because of how much I enjoy it. It's weird and it elects to not deal with things in an overly sensible manner, but it's the perfect payoff to the fairy tale of the series. And I do not think the ending is a Deus Ex Machina, the resolution to the plot. If so, it is much less a Deus Ex Machina than any of the Russell T Davies era finales. They all had much weirder things happening to resolve the plot. This is they fly the TARDIS into they fly the Pandorica, which has light from the beginning of the universe, and into the exploding TARDIS, so it'll explode everywhere at once. That is not a Deus Ex Machina. That is taking something that is integral to why everything's going wrong and turning it into the plot resolution. They're using the plot into the plot resolution. They're not just growing another doctor on the side to solve the plot or having a meta crisis. They're not turning a companion into a god to save the things. They're actually using the mechanics of the actual plot to solve the entire series arc. And it's flipping perfect. And the rewind sequence is gorgeous. And the scene of Matt Smith tucking the young Amelia into bed and saying we're all stories in the end is perfect. And everyone gets their perfect close to the series arc. Rory gets to wait 2,000 years for Amy. Amy chooses Rory. And the 11th Doctor gets to make that sacrifice for Amy. And then the wedding scenes are just so good. After 4 series in the RTD era of series ending on kind of a miserable note, Eccleston's regeneration, Rose on Bad Wolf Bay, Martha's departure, Donna's losing her memories, and the Doctor being left alone in the TARDIS. How lovely it is just to watch a series conclude, and then they're happy, and they're at the wedding, and it's just so good. Maybe it should be in great, not absolute classic, but just my own nostalgia possibly is just pushing it in there. An amazing, amazing finale. Death of the Doctor. Great and above Flesh and Stone, I would say. I am ranking them within the tiers. I probably should have mentioned that. This is a brilliant, brilliant story. Disclaimer, Jo Grant is probably my favourite companion of all time. So this is already onto a winner. Russell Davies writes 11 brilliantly. There's a couple of tiny nitpicks I've got, but this is probably one of the greatest Sarah Jane Adventures episodes. So good. Just so good. The Shan Sheath, I'm impressed that I said that, are great. We get Unit, we get Jo and Sarah, and we get them teaming up, we get them using their memories, and we just get them to fight against this. They're trying to get the TARDIS key and erase death from the universe. And you see all these memories of the Pertwee era, which is my personal favourite era, and stuff from the Tom Baker era. Clyde and Rani are great, and they're teamed up with that guy whose name I can't remember, who's Jo Grant's grandson, and we learn all about what Jo's been doing, and we get the 11th Doctor meeting Jo, which is very sort of similar to the way the 10th Doctor met Sarah Jane, and it's just gorgeous. It's such a good episode, and I was surprised that it's on this list because I was sort of just expecting the Doctor Who episodes, but I'm very glad for the opportunity to talk about how good Death of the Doctor is. Beautiful. A Christmas Carol. Blimey. 2010 was the year for Doctor Who, wasn't it? It just was. Where should I put this? There. Honestly, between Doctor Who Series 5, which is my favourite Doctor Who series, Sarah Jane Adventures Series 4, which is my favourite Sarah Jane series, The Children of Earth came out, that was 2009. There was no Torchwood. But between that and Christmas Carol, which is my favourite Christmas special, this year was just perfect for Doctor Who, and it's no wonder I got so hooked on the show at this time. Oh, A Christmas Carol is just gorgeous, beautiful fairy tale magic. It brings the Christmas, but it never feels like we're just doing pointless Christmas stuff, like in the RTD era when they would weaponize baubles or Christmas trees or Santas. Never anything like that. It takes this tale, and it molds this Dickensian story into this modern time travel narrative, and it does it perfectly. Brilliant. Michael Gambon is just dream casting for the older Kazran. Great acting from Catherine Jenkins from the young Kazran as well. Amy and Rory are sort of in the background. It allows the 11th Doctor to do things, but it also has consequences to the Doctor's actions. He doesn't just manipulate this man's entire life and then the man is happy now. It is melancholic and it is sad, and he just changes the motivations for the Doctor's So the Doctor just changes Kazran's motivations for why he won't help, from someone who doesn't care to someone who does really care, but he's too afraid of being like the Doctor. And I think it's a great way to tell. They could not have told the story any better. I'm just gushing about this entire era at this point. If you don't like the Matt Smith era, don't worry. Series 7 will allow me to occupy some of these lower categories a bit. But man alive, this is good. The Impossible Astronaut, above Death of the Doctor. This is such a good series opener. You cannot tell me otherwise. I don't care what your beef is with the way the Series 6 arc was resolved. I'm okay with the Series 6 arc, but I'm not overly loving it. But man alive, does it start well. And you cannot hold any of the crimes of the Wedding of River Song against this opening two-part, because it has so many great moments. Just dealing with this first part first, the Doctor turns up on the beach and gets shot, killed, and our characters have to burn him, burn his body so that people won't come to the Earth. Then they go back up to the cafe, and there's another Doctor, a younger Doctor, and we realise that we are going to have to inevitably go to Lake Silencio with our character this series. That is a brilliant character arc, with all of our companions having the foreknowledge of how the Doctor is going to die. We then go to 1969. We meet Canton Everett Delaware III. There's Nixon. There's the Silence, who are one of the best Moffat era villains. They are so creepy. There's a brilliant cliffhanger when Amy turns around and shoots the astronaut, and as they're pulling the visor up, and there's a child in there. I mean, you kind of know she won't have shot them, but it's still such a good cliffhanger. Big reveals left, right, and centre. Rory becoming an integral part of this TARDIS team. 11 and River on fire. This is so good. And Day of the Moon is even better. I'm just gushing at this point. I don't care. I don't care. It's so flipping good. This is brilliant, brilliant stuff. The cold open is the only detracting part from this. It feels a little bit out of place, but they've all been there for 3 months. And this has the moment that all of the 11 and Amy stuff gets. I feel like the 11 Amy, Rory being a little bit jealous of the 11th Doctor stuff wasn't properly resolved in Series 5. As much as I'd like to have been gone, I understand why it wasn't gone. This episode allows all of that stuff to be put to bed. So I didn't used to like the Rory stupid face, all that kind of stuff. But I love it when I think that it finally allows Rory to put all that aside, all that jealousy, all that insecurity aside, and really realise that he is the one that Amy loves. And this has the greatest plot resolution ever. The Doctor brainwashes all of humanity to commit genocide, and they won't even know about it. That is so scary, that is so effective, and it's such a clever, dark route to take the episode. And then the Silence get annoyed about that, and they just shoot them all. And there's something beautifully simplistic about that. And then the child that regenerates at the end, and the Amy seeing the picture. Series 6 may not have landed, but man alive, did it. Actually, I do think the series arc was landed. I do like the series arc. But man alive, the questions that it offered were just tantalizing. I was never hooked in Series 12 by the Timeless Child stuff. I was never sitting there, but this just entranced me as a series. This is probably the peak for me of being a Doctor Who fan when I was younger. I got back into the show much later, but this was just, I was obsessed at this point. The Curse of the Black Spot is okay. I kind of like The Curse of the Black Spot. It gets a rough time, but why did it take us 6 series to just have a pirate episode? And yes, it's just a fun, slight episode, but I wouldn't have wanted a dark, serious story for an episode about pirates, because I just wanted to have fun. We have a bit of swashbuckling, a couple of sword fights. We've got a bit of pirate mythology like the Black Spot. We've got the Siren, who's a pretty interesting character. We actually have some great emotional stuff as well. I swear Amy and Rory just got put through the ringer every single week. And this week, he nearly drowns, and she used to do CPR on him. When I talk about the companions in the Chibnall era not being in danger enough, I'm thinking of Amy and Rory, who something mental happened to them every single week. I think Curse of Black Spot's good fun. I think Hugh Bonneville's a good lead character. as the captain. Maybe the ending's a little bit convenient, where they all sort of get a nice happy ending and no one's dead. But I have fun with this, and Steve Thompson is this is my favourite of his 2 Doctor Who scripts. Although the man wrote the Reichenbach Fall for Sherlock, so that's obviously his greatest achievement. But of his Doctor Who work, I think this is his best. The Doctor's Wife. I wasn't going to do this, actually. I wasn't going to put an absolute classic. Just before, I do have a list here of what I'm going to do with the different episodes and what order I'm going to put them in. And just before I went and started filming, I changed The Big Bang and The Doctor's Wife and put them in the absolute classic tier. They are so good. And The Doctor's Wife is such a great episode. Every time I watch it, I think I enjoy it more. When I was younger, didn't really get it, because it's all about the relationship between the Doctor and the TARDIS. And it's done so well, and it feels like, how old is the show at this point? 48 years of this relationship building up and watching it on screen. And the more Doctor Who I get into, the more I get from those interactions between Idris and the 11th Doctor, and Saran Jones is just phenomenal, and it's a funny, witty, scatterbrained script with a lot of big Neil Gaiman style ideas. Make him showrunner already, although his other script is going to be really slagged off. But this one is absolutely really sad. It's perfect fairy tale best. A lot of big ideas. Roy and Amy get put through hell in this one. It's just so many gorgeous, gorgeous exchanges and revelations. You didn't always take me where I wanted to go. No, but I always took you where you needed to go. The building, the TARDIS, thief, where's my thief? It's just perfect. This is Neil Gaiman utterly nailed it for this. Apparently, it was originally written for Series 5. But I think it's good that we had to wait for it a bit longer, because the 11th Doctor is sublime here. He's totally at ease with this role, and having Rory as well makes those scenes of them going around the TARDIS much more effective. Him being aged to death is pretty grim, pretty dark storytelling. Neil Gaiman, you nailed it. You nailed it. The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People. I'll just sort of deal with this. Rebel Flesh is okay. Almost People is bad. Although the Almost People does have the ultimate standout highlight of this entire story, because it has the ending where Amy is revealed to have been a ganger the whole time, which is a massive shock and a brilliantly played twist. But this 2-parter, honestly, I just don't care about it. It's sort of, for me, the first time during the Matt Smith era when I'm watching it that I just sort of zone out a little bit. It just feels like a tonal retread of Cold Earth, Hungry Blood, with the whole share the planet narrative, and all these same ideas that were used only, like 7 episodes ago are all coming. Okay, it wasn't 7 episodes, like 10 episodes ago, are all coming right back up now, and that just kind of feels a bit cheap and a bit weak. And the characters aren't really likable, and even our main cast are out of character. It's a vastly superior script from Matthew Graham. He previously wrote Fear Her, but the man wrote Life on Mars. So this is clearly not the best he can do. It just feels like a weak script. It did not need to be a 2-parter. And some of the CGI, particularly in that second part, I think the first part's okay. Does some okay world building, builds up the characters, and I kind of like Rory's sympathy towards Jennifer. Although I don't kind of like, what are they trying to hint something with that? I don't know, but I just take it as Rory being a lovely person, so I can look past it. But the Almost People just loses me with the really bad CGI, and it just feels like it's dragging too much. There's some interesting ideas screaming to get out, but they could have done this in 45 minutes. They did not require all the additional time here. And then we could have done a 2-part Good Man Goes to War, because that would be so good. Although I don't think Good Man Goes to War is rushed. And I'm going to put it behind Vincent and the Doctor. I think Good Man Goes to War is brilliant. It's a really top-notch Doctor Who story. So many great moments in it. Rory coming of age with the Where Is My Wife, the blowing up the cyber ships to make a point, the building of the team. We get Dorian, we get River, 11 Amy, Rory, obviously. but also Jenny, Strax, and Vastra. We pull in some favourites from the Jadoon, from the Silurians. You know, we really build up this calling on our debts feel. And Amy loses a child, and it's done justice, actually. That moment when it just sort of like dissolves and she's screaming is awful. The music in this episode is sublime, next level, and that cliffhanger, so good, just so good. I should have mentioned 11 is brilliant in this episode as well. His sort of silent rage, Colonel Runaway, if you think that trying to get to me, to people I love, all that kind of stuff. He is so good in those scenes. And the final moments when it's revealed that River is Melody Pond. I have never been more shocked in my life. Apparently, some people at the time saw it coming. I was a 9-year-old who just watched from week to week. I did not theorize with people on Twitter. So I did not have a clue, and I was stunned. And I looked at my TV for like 10 minutes, unable to believe what I had just watched, and then piecing it together, going, "Oh, hang on, that kind of does make sense." Such a brilliant twist, such a brilliant twist. Stephen Moffat deserves the full credit for how that story played out on screen. Let's Kill Hitler is good. I know that there is a lot of dislike for this story, but I kind of like it. Yes, it's too fast. Yes, it kind of throws away the very interesting idea of the Tesselector and the time-traveling death penalty enforcing machine, basically. And there's a lot of good stuff that's possibly subverted for arc maintenance, but hey, I have a lot of fun with this story. It is a mess, but it's a good mess. I know that the YouTube channel, the Who Addicts, have this as like their worst episode ever. This is something that Liv from the Who Addicts always talks about as her least favorite episode. And I understand why. I can see the reasons why this one would be, because it is a lot of stuff going on. And it could have been a lot better. The character of Mel should have been someone we've known for a long time. And yeah, the twist with her is essentially the same twist as A Good Man Goes to War with it. It's this person we've known, and it's actually your daughter. But I'm enjoying myself. I have a lot of fun. There's a lot of weird stuff. There's a lot of great lines. Rory is top notch, putting Hitler in the cupboard, punching Hitler. I'm walking around a giant replica of my wife. All of that stuff. And yeah, I do enjoy this one, though. I understand that it is deeply flawed, and they should have dedicated more time to the ideas they were trying to put out. That seems to be a recurrent theme. I understand, I recognize the flaws with a lot of the stuff, but I just love it anyway. Night Terrors is okay, I would say. I'll put behind Victor the Daleks. There is a generational thing here. For a lot of people, I did not get into Doctor Who when a lot of other people did. And there's people who are a couple of years older than me that got in immediately with a revival. I wasn't even living in Britain during the revival. I was living in Gibraltar, so kind of missed that whole wave of excitement, I suppose. I would have been 3 when The Empty Child aired, 4, 3, 3.5. So I never got those classic creepy RTD era stories that everyone talks about how scared they were by the gas mask zombies or by the Vashta Narada or by the Weeping Angels. I mean, I did get Weeping Angel stories of my own, but Night Terrors actually was the really creepy Stuck in Your Nightmares episode, because those dolls are so creepy. And to other people I know who got into Doctor Who at the same time as me, this episode was a joy and everyone loved it. In hindsight, I can see that it is kind of run-of-the-mill, but also I appreciate that it feels like what Fear Her should have been. The lonely alien lashing out, slightly beyond their control. This is what Fear Her wanted to be, but ended up being utter crap. The dolls are great. Amy and Rory get put in some incredibly high-stakes danger. I like the 11th Doctor with Alex. I kind of like all the plot twists. It's got a creepy atmosphere throughout, but it's not anything particularly special. Okay feels like a very good place to put that story. The Girl Who Waited. Well, what are we doing with you? Just above Amy's choice. No. Yeah, just there. Sorry, I was just checking my list for what I was doing with that. The Girl Who Waited is an episode, again, when I was younger, I did not get. Amazon refund, that's lovely. It's just as an episode that I didn't get when I was younger because I was too young to really appreciate the emotional levels and the character stuff that was being done. And it was an episode that when I grew up and actually started looking into the Doctor Who fandom, I saw a lot of love for. And I was like, I kind of think it's just an okay episode. And it's another one of those episodes that every time I watch it, I just love it even more. There's some stuff that I still don't really like, but it's a Doctor-like story that puts Amy and Rory at the focus. It was a brilliant episode. It perfectly evaluates their dynamic and Amy and the Doctor's dynamic and Rory and the Doctor's dynamic and really tests all of those relationships that are established very well by this point in Series 6, when this TARDIS team feel very comfortable with each other, and it really tests those dynamics. And some of the moments in this episode are just so good. The moment that's actually been shown in that picture there, which you probably won't be able to see on screen, but when she puts her hand up against the TARDIS door and Rory's saying, so I have to choose which wife do I want? This isn't fair, you're turning me into you. And even just Rory losing his temper with the Doctor when he says, why don't you check your history books one time, check if there's an outbreak of plague before you turn up. And the Doctor said, well, that's not how I travel. He says, well, I do not want to travel with you. Really just pushing all these characters to their limits, and brilliant moment after moment. Great concept, great set design as well. Some really lovely stuff. The handbots are good. I really like this one, but it's not as good as as the God Complex, which is probably one of the most underrated episodes of all Doctor Who. Genuine top-notch stuff in this episode. I really love the God Complex. This is why I love Series 6. I mean, the sheer amount of great episodes, even if sometimes the arc-heavy episodes were not amazing. They were all good, but they weren't amazing. But the individual episodes, sublime, in my opinion. The God Complex is this creepy 1984 Room 101 style thing, and it's very aware of that. It even has the here comes the candle to light you to bed, here comes the chopper to chop off your head song. So it knows that it's pastiching those very ideas. Very creepy, very effective, and a very unsettling tone and atmosphere. Murray Gold gives one of his weirdest scores to this kind of hotel thing, and it mixes those Orwellian 1984 ideas with Greek mythology and the labyrinth and the Minotaur, and it also has this very complex evaluation of faith and of religious faith, and also faith in a person, and Amy's faith in the Doctor. I also love that we never got to see what was in the Doctor's room. I know that we saw it in Time of the Doctor. I kind of wish that we didn't, because I feel like it should have been John Hurt as the War Doctor. That's what should have been in that room. But I love all that stuff. I also love that they keep trying to show Rory the door because he's not religious, but this idea of converting faith into something that can be fed on, also because the villain is it's not a Naimon, it's a distant cousin of the Naimon. That is a nice callback and it makes sense, but the ideas in this episode are so rich, and I don't think there's a Doctor Who episode which gives a better representation of the horror of death than this one. Very few Doctor Who episodes actually give any weight to death. People just die and that's it. But because we've got this close-knit band of characters, when Harry dies and they find his glasses and they find his sucked white corpse, you feel that moment. And Rita's death is probably the best done death of any minor Doctor Who character ever. Brilliant music, brilliant score, and genuine terror and despair from the Doctor, and that him leaving them off because he's put them in too much danger is such a brave decision. I don't know if the show should have stuck with it. It would have been a great ending, but I kind of feel like they were right to not stick with it because it allows the 11th Doctor's vanity to pull the pawns back in, and that be the downfall at the end. But I just love that he took that decision, because it feels like he's so far away from David Tennant to even he was willing to take Martha at the end of Last of the Time Lords, even though he knew that he shouldn't do it. and it's so far away from that. It's a brilliant, beautiful ending, and I love the scene when he breaks Amy's faith in him. It's nowhere near as dark as the sort of moment that everyone compares it to in Curse of Fenric, but it's that shot where you see her, and he still sees her as the little girl, and then when he calls her Amy Williams rather than Amelia Pond. Such a subtle detail, but so well earned. Closing time. Am I going to get slag something off? Am I going to get to slag something off? Hey! Yeah, I don't like closing time. It's the one episode of Series 6 where I kind of understand where a lot of people are coming from. So yeah, be happy. I'm slagging off a Gareth Roberts script. And closing time is just not good. Like the stuff with Matt Smith and James Corden and Stormageddon Download of All, I'm fine with. I don't like the gay jokes and all the jokes about them being mistaken for a couple. I don't find them funny. There's nothing to do with being offended or thinking that they're. I just find them boring and repetitive. But a lot of the stuff between Eleven and Craig is good fun. But the story with the Cybermen is so weak. It is the total. I mean, the Cybermen were a joke before now, but they just need a reboot. They just need a revival. Unfortunately, the reboot they did get was Nightman Summer, which is even worse. But closing time, it just does some really bad stuff with the Cybermen. Love conquers cybernetic conversion. The Cybermen are dull and uninteresting. And I just, the best bit of the episode is the bit that was written by Stephen Moffat at the end. The final scenes where he takes the cowboy hat and he's going to Lake Silencio. And then River gets taken by the silence that leads into the finale. That was all good stuff. But the rest of it was kind of not. I don't enjoy closing time very much. I think it's the first outright bad story of Matt Smith's era because Almost People Rebel Flesh, one part was okay, one bit was bad. It's the first time that I'm just like, I could skip this one and not really care. Which is quite impressive that we're nearly 2 series in and that's the first time I've had that reaction. But Wedding of River Song there, I loved it on original broadcast. I had utterly adored it. I thought it was like the best thing I'd ever seen. In retrospect, it does not really that impressive. I kind of like some of the stuff going on, but I feel like we should have had more of it. This required 2 parts to really do the ideas justice. The idea of everything in history happening at once is huge, and you could do a series on that. That is I can't even think of a word for it. That's a magnificently, the magnitude of that idea, that's the word I was going for, is insane. And the fact that that's just, it's not even really a part of the episode, it's just there for some cool little effects and cameos. That feels like a waste. Some of the stuff's rushed, but the stuff that I do like, I like the Tess Lecter ending. I know people think it's a cop-out, but then he didn't really die. Well, he was never really going to die. That's like saying every cliffhanger in Classic Who was a cop-out. Oh, but I thought the monster was going to kill the companion. Well, no, because that was never going to happen. They were always going to get out through some weird, some weird way like that. That's just how the show works. And they were never going to have the Doctor get shot on a beach, and that was going to be his end totally. So I don't really have an issue with that. But I kind of feel like River holding on to just tell the Doctor that he's loved is a bit of a flipping stupid part. I think that things that are a little bit unnecessary happen, like Amy and Rory forgetting who each other are. Stuff like that I just kind of feel like is slightly superfluous to the actual design of the plot, which I like, but it could have been so much better, and that's the frustrating part. That Brigadier scene, though, top notch. The first of many beautiful tributes to Nicholas Courtney, who was, other than people who've played the Doctor, the most important actor that's ever been in this show. Without question. He transcends companion status, that man. I adore the Brigadier. Just completely do. The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. I appear to have forgotten to write this one down. So, okay, is actually where I would put it. That's just going completely off the bat. I talked about this one in my Christmas video, but I actually kind of don't mind it. Yes, the plot with the trees and all that stuff stupid, but I kind of like the Arwell family, and I kind of like the premise that Christmas special is not about saving the whole planet from a deadly alien invasion, but rather just about reuniting a family at Christmas. And yes, Madge flying her husband through the time vortex is stupid, but it's Christmas. I don't care. You have to give me those nice Christmassy moments. I've already mentioned C.S. Lewis in this video. I'm a massive Narnia fan. The really poor paper thin Narnia parody really drags this down. They could have done so much more with those ideas. And I really hope that we do get a story one day where we meet C.S. Lewis and we go to the land of fiction and we actually go to Narnia. But this has kind of probably put an end to that. I love Madge and Lily Arwell. I think they're great. But the story kind of loses me when Bill Bailey rocks up in the middle in a massive harvester. I don't think tonally it knows what it wants to be. But the ending is gorgeous with the 11th Doctor reuniting with him and Rory. Really, really top-notch stuff at the end there. Asylum of the Daleks. Oh, here comes your controversy. I love Asylum of the Daleks, and I again kind of understand why some people don't. I don't understand why people hate it. I understand why you might have some issues with it. I think that the Amy Rory divorce thing, whilst admittedly rushed, is actually pretty good because it actually deals with the issues that would have dealt with from losing a child and actually dealing with those. Maybe they're all resolved too quickly. But then no one wanted that story to drag out over the course of their final series. Maybe it was ill-advised to do it because they didn't have the time to really pull it off. But I think it's fun. Honestly, the real problem people have this episode is the Daleks. And I think it's just a matter of taste. Yes, I love when the Daleks are used as a massive genocide machine to just roll in anywhere and kill people. And that's my preferred type of Dalek story. But I don't have an issue with Daleks being fun. And Dalek stories being fun. The Chase is one of my favorite Dalek stories ever. It is totally bonkers and does not take the Daleks seriously. And I don't think that's a problem. I think you can do fun Dalek stories. And this just is. It's just a romp. And I love Oswin. I love the Amy Rory Doctor dynamic is at its most witty and very well interplayed. The Moffat dialogue is incredible. It's just a shame that Oswin wiping the Daleks from the Doctor's memory totally just gets retconned out within the next time we meet the Daleks, because that was actually a pretty interesting twist. It's not perfect, but I kind of really like a lot of the big ideas that they were going for here. Again, maybe it could have been a two-parter, honestly, but I'm happy to have fun with a Dalek story. Not every Dalek story has to be big and moody, particularly not when we're going to a planet of insane Daleks. And the special weapons Dalek was there, so I am so there for that. I love the special weapons Dalek. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is good. And I'm hearing nothing otherwise. A lot of people really hate this one. I'm just here for the Douglas Adams style tone of this entire story. This is a Doctor Who story that does not take itself too seriously. It has a large cast and it's incredibly funny. And it's written by Chris Chibnall, a man who cannot balance 4 people or tell any competent jokes. And in this episode, he's on absolute fire. The Doctor is dark and mysterious, but most of the episode, he is very, very funny. The villains are great. The robots are just a great laugh, played by Mitchell and Webb. I really love this story. I understand it's not objectively good, but I adore it anyway, because it's a great laugh, and I always have fun with the story, and that is important. A Town Called Mercy is another one that I have warmed to over the years. Again, probably as you just get older, you started the more deep episodes kind of go up in your estimations, and some of the episodes, like Victor of the Daleks or Night Terrors, that were just fun, do go down in your estimations. Really, really big ideas here. Not enough villains really push the 11th Doctor, and I want to call him Shara's Jack, but that's not his name. Adrian Scarborough's character really, really does push the Doctor, and he is a reflection of the Doctor in many ways. And it's a very interesting idea around mercy and around, I suppose, the morality of taking revenge as well. And it brings sort of contrasting emotions from all the different characters towards Adrian Scarba's character. Amy is the one who's 100% going, no, we cannot let him. And I just love the 11th Doctor throwing him over the line and saying, today I honour the victims first. The Masters, the Daleks, all the people who died because of my mercy. But also refinding the value of that mercy and the moral sensibility of that mercy over the course of the episode is really great to watch. I've been talking for a really long time about these episodes. I'm going to try and speed this up. The Power of 3 is okay. It probably would have been good, but what the heck was the ending about? I know that there's behind-the-scenes issues, but you cannot release an ending that is that weak. But the character stuff in this episode is enough to keep it out of the bad column, because against all odds, Chris Chibnall was doing brilliant stuff with the characters in this episode. And we get Kate Stewart, who's another lovely little reference to the Brigadier. We get Unit, we get a story that's very Russell T Davies era in its feel and tone. We get a beautiful little scene on the bridge between the 11th Doctor and Amy. Amy and Rory talk about leaving the TARDIS feels very natural, and I think Chris Chibnall deserves more credit for the way that he wrote those characters in those episodes. Honestly, he does more with Amy and Rory in this episode than he's done with his own companions in 2 series. It's amazing how much and how well all the stuff is done in this episode. And if it wasn't for the final act, you'd be looking at a really good story. But it just doesn't. The ideas do not really pay off, and the final bit is just so poor. I love Brian Williams. Possibly the best Chibnall invention of a character. Between him and Graham, that's Chibnall's best inventions in Doctor Who. Angels take Manhattan. It's the weakest of the Weeping Angel stories. All the outright Weeping Angel stories we've had. Apparently we might be getting one in Series 13, so I imagine that will be the weakest one. Isn't that harsh to say that already? Possibly it is a little bit harsh to already be saying that. I just find 45 minutes just breezes by with Angels Take Manhattan. It's good fun. It's witty. It's a lot of big, clever ideas. I really hate the Statue of Liberty thing, but I understand that you're writing a story about statues in New York. You're going to kind of want to use the main one, but the idea that the Statue of Liberty just wandered across New York and nobody saw it feels a bit unlikely. Or more than a bit unlikely, just more totally stupid. But the stuff done with Amy and Rory, the jumping off the roof together or not at all, that piece of music, and then making it the audience's fault because, you can't change time, not once you've read it, and making it kind of the Doctor's fault for reading the chapter's contents with Amelia's last farewell, but also for reading, for letting us as the audience read Rory's grave and then Rory going away. But Amy making the decision to stay with Rory after back in the 11th hour, she decided to run away on her wedding night away from Rory with the Doctor is the perfect end for a character. And that note, hello, old friend. And then this is the story of Amelia Pond. And this is how it ends. It feels like the end of my childhood. I'm not going to lie. 11, Amy and Rory were my childhood. I was never as into Doctor Who after they left. As I just never got into it again until the very end of the Capaldi era, when I came back in as a huge Whovian. I kind of zoned out after they left because they were the show for me, those two. And I will always stand up for them against anyone who tries to say that they are bad companions. I will never take them. Will not take that. Not one bit. The Snowmen. Good or great? I could go. I don't care. I don't care anymore. Hang on. Yes, I'll just leave it there. Ian McKellen and Richard E. Grant are in this. They should be a better villain combo than they are. They're good, but considering they've got two of the greatest actors and Britain has to offer to play those roles, it should be better. Jenny Strax and Vastra are at their absolute best. They're flipping hilarious in this. It's funny, it's whimsical. It brings the fairy tale magic back, which Series 7A kind of lost. And honestly, Series 7B kind of loses as well a little bit. But it brings it back in spades, gorgeous musical score from Murray Gold. I can't believe I haven't really talked about Murray Gold that much, but honestly, just take it for granted that every single episode, he's great. Every single one. This is easily one of my favourite Murray Gold scores. I love the idea of the Doctor sulking on a box in a cloud through a staircase. That is just beautifully whimsical. Victorian Clara is the best Clara. I love Clara with Capaldi. I think she becomes a great character. But my life, we should have kept this one. We should have kept this one. She's so good. Very interesting idea. The snowmen of the episode's title are totally superfluous and not really important. I'm just here for the great intelligence. I'm just here for Victorian Clara. And honestly, she is the thing moving this from good to great tier, because she is so good. Easily the best one-off companion that we've ever seen. Such an incredible performance. In an episode with Matt Smith, with Ian McKellen, with Richard E. Grant, it's the young Jenna Coleman who totally steals the show. That's going to be controversial. Okay, I'll leave that. Series 7B. Yes, this is where I will finally get to actually slag off some of these Matt Smith episodes. The Bells of St. John is okay. I'm kind of forgiving towards it because I don't mind it. I think it's fun, but it's also kind of just there. I think Stephen Moffat has actually said that himself. It feels like it's his most middling script ever, and I have to just totally agree with that sentiment. It's okay, but it's nothing particularly special. It was nice that the Great Intelligence came back. Clara's nowhere near as interesting as she was in either Asylum of the Daleks or the Snowmen. But I don't know. It's all right, I suppose. I like the Wi-Fi idea. And yeah, there's some cool stuff, some cool little sequences. Rings of Akaten is bad. Yeah, I know. I know that's maybe a little bit, is that controversial? The music is sublime. Matt Smith's big speech is sublime. Everything else is kind of just rubbish. I like the child actress, she's pretty good. I'm okay about the stuff about Clara's backstory. I feel like it's kind of weak, and I really wish we'd learned more about her mum. She seemed like an interesting character who just never really gets brought up again, even in the kind of smallest sense. It tries to do stuff with Clara's backstory that she works, and at least we get some nice little cool aliens, but I don't know about this one. Big planet, that's not really the zombie's not really the god, he's just the god's alarm clock. Weird stuff. It's nice music, nice speech. The whole episode as a collective thing, I have no real time for. I would happily skip it. Cold War is the one real saving grace of Series 7B, other than the finale, which I appreciate is actually a fairly controversial statement. Oh, here we are. We've reached a new level. I think Cold War is brilliant. I think it's the best Ice Warrior story, classic and new, even though it's one that appears to have the worst reputation. I think Clara's at her best. I think there is an amazing guest cast. The Ice Warrior is great. It's basically the Ice Warrior's equivalent to Dalek, just one wreaking complete havoc and being a huge, high-level threat. Nice pun, great setting for an episode. It's a great base under siege style format. I think it's possibly my favourite Mark Gatiss script for Doctor Who. There's a lot of great stuff here. I really enjoy Cold War. I think it's a great episode, and I think it deserves a reappraisal by a lot of people. And I kind of like the ending as well. I know it's been criticised for being a little bit too fast, but I kind of really like the fact that they do just kind of just decide to show mercy at the end, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mark Gatiss is clearly a man who has an incredible knowledge of Ice Warrior lore, because he's throwing stuff at us left, right, and centre, and it's a really fun watch, in my opinion. Hyde is okay. I believe I've heard a description of Hyde where it's the most okay Doctor Who story to ever okay. It's just kind of middling. I like the two supporting characters who are the kind of ghost hunters, the psychic and the guy. But the final twist that it's not a horror story, it's a love story. just doesn't work for me. I don't understand what it's trying to say about the 11th Doctor, because it kind of depicts him as this romantic, and then you can't trust him. There's a sliver of ice in his heart. It's a weird one. I don't have any objections to watching it. I find it perfectly enjoyable, but just kind of there at the same time. Journey to the Centre of the Tardis. Terrible. The first terrible of the Matt Smith era, and actually not the last, even though we are this far towards the end. I really hate this one. Stephen Thompson, I'm sorry. Curse of the Black Spot was miles superior to this. This is such a weak story. We are going round the TARDIS. This should not be this dull. Why does the Doctor team up with these three random scavenger guys? Why are we supposed to care about this random subplot with these guys as brothers, and why they're telling this one guy is an android? Why are we supposed to care about all this stuff? We want to see round the TARDIS. This feels like a deliberate reaction to the success of The Doctor's Wife, when people are like, oh, hey, look, new TARDIS stuff. And in this time, we get to see literally the only thing keeping my interest is, hey, look, it's the swimming pool. That's a cool looking library. Hey, look, that's that thing from Good Man Goes to War. Random fan service is not enough to make a plot. And you cannot, the ending is just so stupid. Well, the whole point of Doctor Who is the reason that his time travel does not make him just a complete and utter omnipotent god is that he cannot just go back and try again. If he fails, I'm part of events now. I can't just hop back, give myself a big button, and avert the entire plot ever happening. Why would you do that? Why? This one really, really hacks me off. Boring side characters, a boring premise, a villain that makes no sense. I understand you're all about bootstrap paradoxes, Moffat, but you cannot be killed by the future version of yourself. You just can't. The future version of yourself that was only killed by the future version of yourself. Well, that is a loop that never ends. You cannot have an ending where the Doctor just hits a button and averts the entire plot. If we slagged it off when Last of the Time Lords did it, we'll have to slag it off here. The Crimson Horror. Between the Crimson Horror, I think is bad, but I enjoy it because it's stuck between Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS and Nightman Summer. And compared to those two episodes, it's a masterpiece. But in reality, it kind of wastes Diana Rigg and her daughter. It's a nice bit of Strax, Jenny, and Vastra, but I kind of just think the plot is totally forgettable. Hasn't got many great moments, even for the Paternoster gang. It hasn't got as many comedic moments that don't feel forced as normal. Matt Smith is kind of at his weakest ever, I think, in this. He's totally way too handsy, and everyone has drawn attention to the fact that he kisses Jenny without consent. I mean, Crimson Horror, man. This era was just going so well, wasn't it? It was just going so well. Nightman Summer is the worst story in the Matt Smith era. It was, until The Timeless Children, I would have maintained that this is my least favourite Doctor Who story ever. I hate this episode. I'm sorry, Neil, you may have the Doctor's Wife and you may still be the best choice to be showrunner, but I cannot be dealing with this. It's so bad. The kids are annoying. These Cybermen are ridiculously overpowered and still not a threat whatsoever. We have a boring guest cast that wastes the greatest guest cast in the history of this show. Tasman Outhwaite, Warwick Davis, Jason Watkins. This is a who's who of British television, and every single one of them is in dull roles. Cybermen are awful. The new design, what were they thinking? I did not like Matt Smith's performance in this as Mr. Clever. I mean, there's some fun little elements to it, but I do not really enjoy it. Clara is not a fully formed character enough to anchor this plot on her own. The chess stuff is a reference back to Curse of Fenric, but it just reminds me that Curse of Fenric exists, and I love that story, and the fact that that story is a billion times better than this monstrosity. They literally turn up in the TARDIS and they hang about and wait for a plot to develop for no reason. The kids are incredibly aggravating. Everything is just poor and weak. And the Doctor has this whole, we can't be blowing up planets to destroy the Cybermen. And at the end of the episode, what do? They just pop off the planet and blow it up. What was the flipping point? What was the point when you could have given us a two-part Name of the Doctor finale? Dear, dear, dear. Name of the Doctor is there. Actually, all those Series 7 ones have kind of ended up in the Great Column, but not towards the higher end of the Great Column. It's a interesting little detail, just for my own personal amusement. The Name of the Doctor is not above Asylum with the Daleks. Is a good finale. I enjoy it. I like the Whisper Men. I like the Great Intelligence. I love all the stuff with going through the time stream, but it has no real action, which is the reason why it stops it from being an even better story. There is no real escalation of action, and the stakes feel a little bit false. I don't know. It feels like another, it's the end of the universe, but it's all fine now kind of moments. The Whisper Men, I've already said I like Richard E. Grant's performance. I think this is his best part in the role. I love seeing all the previous Doctors, and the cliffhanger is sublime. I've talked about the Pandora Opens one. This is second to the Pandora Opens. The introducing John Hurt as the Doctor was jaw-dropping. It's so good. And this finale is great. I really love this finale. I feel like I'm just stuck in, because I've just been talking about Series 7B, I'm just sort of stuck in a rut where I've just been slagging things off for the last sort of 5 or so minutes. But actually, this is really great. And I better start being prepared for talking about good things, because Day of the Doctor is the best episode of the Matt Smith era. I don't care that people have sarged this episode in recent years. I kind of don't care that people start to say, but it's not really a celebration of 50 years of Who. It's more a celebration of 8 years of New Who. I kind of don't care about any of the criticisms that people have leveled on this episode. I flipping love every single element of it. And I don't know if it's disingenuous. I love Matt Smith. So the reason that it feels bad for me saying that this best episode is an episode where he is not the only Doctor. He is still the best Doctor in that episode. The plot is just so good, and it's not just 5 Doctors style throwing fan service at the screen, and that's what people who slag this off as just a celebration of New Who want. What more did you want from Classic Who? I'm a huge Classic Who fan. I can see what they've put in. The Zygons for the first time since the 70s. Tom Baker, every single Doctor that there is. We have enough stuff. We do not require to just be shown like hundreds of different companions from the past. We don't require all that pointless 5 Doctors fan service. This is a plot, first and foremost. It's a character thing, second. And the fan service is just the cherry on top. Doctors interacting. Clara really coming into her own as a character. John Hurt, David Tennant, a great blast of fun. Joanna Page as Elizabeth. And it didn't need to be massive in scale. It could have gone, hey, we're doing the 50th. We're going to go into the Time War. We're going to have an hour and a half of being shot up by Daleks and big explosions. But no, it just went whimsical. And I really love the timey-wimey jumping nature of this whole plot. I adore The Day of the Doctor. I think it is easily one of the greatest. It's the one piece of television that I would take with me if I was going to Desert Island. This is what I would take. It's not my favorite episode of Doctor Who ever, but it's the one I would take. I can watch it and just be happy. The Tom Baker turn up at the end makes me so happy. All the Doctors showing up to save Gallifrey makes me so happy. And I refuse, Chibnall, to believe that it's gone now and you've totally ruined this episode and made it effectively pointless. It celebrates 50 years of the past, and it looks to the next chapter of the future by saving Gallifrey, Chris. That is what it does. It opens the door to new storytelling opportunities for the Doctor and for Gallifrey. Just have... I'm not even going to start. I'll just be annoyed if I start talking about what they did in Spyfall Part 2. Lord, I hate that episode. Time of the Doctor is okay. I kind of feel like it's a weak ending for Matt Smith. There's a lot of good stuff in it. Actually, a lot of the character stuff. And it's the perfect end for the 11th Doctor as a character, what it allows the character to do. But as a story, it's a kind of overstuffed mess. And it's because Matt Smith was leaving earlier than Stephen Moffat intended, and he had to really rush the Trenzalore story arc to tie up all of these threads that he'd been playing at and pulling at these strings throughout this entire era. And it doesn't really all come together. all of the arc bits are fine, and it provides answers to all these questions, but there's just not enough room for the story to breathe, and it ends up feeling more like a series of revelations than a real well put together story. Having said all that, this has the best regeneration scene ever. The regeneration speech is perfect. It's the perfect antithesis to Tennant's awful, oh, I'm dying, it's so sad. Even when I regenerate, it feels like I die. Oh. It's the perfect, we all change when you think about it. All through our lives, we're all different people, and that's good. You've got to keep changing as long as you remember all the people that you used to be. Perfect, perfect dialogue, a beautiful speech. Taking off the bow tie, fish fingers and custard, seeing young Amelia, seeing Karen Gillan walk down the stairs, and then the shock that really catches the audience off guard when he just bang, Peter Capaldi, and we have my favourite Doctor of all time, and I cannot wait to talk about Peter Capaldi and how much I love his era, and to totally disagree with everyone who says that his era is poor or that it's weak or that Moffat didn't have a clue what he was doing, because I just totally disagree with that on a fundamental level. And I think that says a lot. I think the structure, the way this tier list look at the moment, it's got 8 absolute classics. That might be more than any other New Who era. It's not the most of any, because Tom Baker had way more in the top column. But the fact that there's so little at the bottom says so much about how much I love Matt Smith's era. For me, the best era of New Who. It wasn't consistently written, and Capaldi's era may be the era I would take with me to a desert island, because Capaldi, but this era is just so good. And yes, I had to slag off bits of it towards the end with Series 7, particularly Series 7B, and maybe it does lose steam after a while, but I still think that it is the best era of New Who. Thank you very much. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments down below, and see you for Capaldi hopefully tomorrow.